Anyways, you get the idea, right? We've got a paddle. I brought up here the ice report. And I'm going to do a little bit of plugging for the Allies program. Yeah, so I introduced myself yesterday, so I think most people know who I am, so I won't speak on that. We're going to be talking about the Conservation Through Reconciliation Partnership Grant. Really excited about that. In the ICE report, I'll back up to when I was invited by federal government and Alberta government staff to present on tribal parks and ICCAs to the National Steering Committee for the Pathway to Canada Target 1, it was a bit of an odd experience because most of the work that I had done in tribal parks was under the Stephen Harper government and Christy Clark in BC. And so I wasn't used to getting invitations from government to hear about tribal parks as something that they could possibly support. A peculiar feeling, a very peculiar feeling for a brown-skinned guy who's used to doing direct action strategies on the land and such, and assertive strategies for biodiversity conservation to be invited into the layer, so to speak, of government. And so what I did to ensure that I wasn't, I was clear in my opening presentation to the National Steering Committee that I'm not prepared. I wouldn't be a good token Indian. If you're looking for a token Indian in this process, I'm not good for that. And if you're looking for a watered down version of tribal parks, I can't be a part of that either. And so, which is the reason why I brought this paddle up here, because we're celebrating the 35-year anniversary of the Mears Island Tribal Park. In 1984, Mears Island was slotted for clear-cut logging, a multi-billion-dollar industry, a close company to the province of British Columbia, Macmillan Bloedel. And due to the assertion of Indigenous law, particularly ESOC, the Law of Respect in the New Chant Constitution, those trees are still standing today. The province and the federal government has never recognized that tribal park, and we're okay with that because we've never been offered appropriate recognition from government for those tribal parks. And what I felt like when being invited in to help with the Pathway to Canada Target 1, I felt that maybe, just maybe, we may be bordering on getting to that place where we could have appropriate recognition and better relationships. But I wasn't certain, and so I undertook a personal due diligence process of approximately 3.5, 4 months of intense conversations with different staff from the National Steering Committee. And what arose from that, it started out as naming the elephant in the room. We named 4 elephants in the room and went through detailed conversations about those elephants. And eventually they transformed into moose. And so was born the 4 moose narrative. And the 4 moose very quickly is jurisdictional solutions. We have to have, if I won't be able to go across Canada and look elders and leaders in the eye and talk to them about the Pathway to Canada Target 1 unless it involves true jurisdictional solutions. Not just paper parks or a nice idea and some cool brochures. And number 2 was financial solutions. We have to be sure that there's going to be some energy behind this stuff and long-lasting financial solutions to ensure the long-lasting sustainability of these new IPCAs or tribal parks. And the 3rd moose was capacity development, that we would, again, with the idea that we don't want to just create stranded assets, we need to ensure that there's an investment in capacity development. And so this 3rd moose is part of the reason why I'm so happy to engage with Robin Faisal and other folks from the academic community, because we're going to have to develop training programs, we're going to have to develop curriculum, and we're going to have to and that has to start right away, because the money's, you heard in the last presentation, the doors for the purse strings are loose and money's hitting the road, and it's like that post-2008 recession. There was the Canadian Economic Action Plan, and you have to have a shovel-ready project, and as soon as the money hits the ground, it's like spend. You got to spend it all by March 31st. April Fool's Day, right around the corner. It's like Indian New Year in Canada. So yeah, I mean, that's a very brief sort of context for that. The fourth moose is cultural keystone species, because no elder has ever called me up and said, "Hey Eli, can you tell me about those acronyms again, or the categories at IUCN or the CBD?" Elders and people, trappers, people on the land, they're interested in their particular species, like whether it's a moose or a salmon or a caribou, the white bears. So the process has been good, but there is a risk still. There's a risk that new parks and protected areas will be created and just sort of dressed up with Indigenous engagement, and that we need to guard against that, because the effect of watering down something like tribal parks can be such a dangerous thing for other nations. And so again, I would just reiterate that with the Mears Island Tribal Park, we didn't have to make a big deal out of it, but I wanted to make a big deal out of it, because I want to ensure that we don't lose the real McCoy, so to speak. And so late at night, one night I was falling asleep and I just had the idea. It's the 35-year anniversary. Let's celebrate the heck out of that. We'll travel all over Canada. We'll raise funds and we'll raise awareness. And the three messages, like I had mentioned, was, because we want to celebrate the work of Moses Martin and the non-Indigenous community. Our tribal park was a act of reconciliation before the word was trendy. There was Indigenous peoples and there was non-Indigenous peoples working together. I always tell people that 500 years ago, if some young man came to the chiefs and elders and said, "I want to do a tribal park on that island," they'd look at him like he's crazy, because just your whole economy, your whole land, it's an interconnected phenomenon. That's Wana Jasilthuis, that's Haukmin. These were places that were already managed for abundancy, not sustainability. But so the term tribal park itself, although it seems quite tribal and it's just about us, it's actually about sharing, and it's about working together, and it's about reestablishing cross-cultural literacy that my elder Larry McDermott always talks about. So the three simple messages for this one is, number one, know who you are, and that goes for everyone. This is the first advice that I give to environmental groups who want to get better at engaging with Indigenous peoples. Know who you are, like know your own personal history and where you come from and the places your ancestors loved and looked at and got their sustenance from. What were your cultural keystone species, And two, believe in yourself. Being empowered. I was joking around with one of my government colleague who's employed by the government. He said, no, I'm unemployed right now, but I'm empowered. You are employed. I am empowered. I don't know where my next paycheck's coming from, but that's okay. So know who you are, believe in yourself, and be bold and courageous for the unborn future generations to come. They're going to be looking at us, and this is a prayer chant that my uncle Levi, he opened up all of our tribal parks planning. We had the map making exercises, the land use plans, land relationship plans, watershed plans, all the paper you'd ever want, and CD-ROMs and such, electronic files and emails. And but the most important thing was the medicine that my Uncle Levi brought. Every single gathering, he started out with a prayer chant. And he explained to the participants that when you can pray and think about whatever you want while I'm chanting, but for me, what I'm doing is I'm calling all of my ancestors. I'm calling all of your ancestors, past, present, and future ancestors. That's the way we think about a new Channelth. And I'm calling them to be all around this room while we meet today. And they will watch us, and they will listen to us, and they will even know our thoughts. So it's a way of preparing your mind to think in their best interest and speak in their best interests and make decisions in their best interests. So that prayer chant was absolutely critical in opening up our meetings. So when we talk about being bold and courageous for the unborn future generations to come, imagine that every one of your text messages, every one of your emails is blind CC'd to your future generations. That they will look back at what you did or what you didn't do, and they'll either celebrate and have a party or they'll cry. So those are the messages. And the thing I'd end on is that, well, not just Harrison Ford signed this, and my new friend from Innu, but also actually the first signature on it was David Suzuki's. And you may have heard him speak. He has the doom and gloom speech. Of course, everyone loves that one. But he's also been talking a lot about the importance of Indigenous knowledge systems. And he explains in very clear terms that when a language is lost, vast amounts of information about biological diversity and ecosystem function is lost along with those languages. And he accepted my invitation. We threw our first 35-year anniversary party in Victoria, in James Bay. Moses Martin, he was the elected chief in 1984 for us, and he's also our elected chief today. He came, he did a beautiful speech in our language. It was Chief Gordon Plennis's birthday. We had birthday cake for him. He gave away a bunch of smoked fish and elk meat. It was a beautiful party. Miles Richardson came. It was a sold-out event, see? Art Napoleon sang and shared his beautiful sense of humor. He called himself he looks more like a Mongolian bodyguard than a Deneza from Treaty 8 country. But who also spoke was David Suzuki. And he shared a lot of great stories. But what he ended on was the notion that, and this was something that he had said to a CEO of a mining company, he said that we should all be paying rent in Canada. We should be paying rent to Indigenous peoples. And there was a big clap, everyone clapped, and he left the stage, and I came up onto the stage and I said, Dr. Suzuki, I'm so glad you said that, because one of the initiatives that we're talking about tonight is the Tribal Parks Allies program. Since 2009, Tlaoquiet Tribal Parks, we've been collecting an ecosystem service fee. For those big trees on Mears Island are natural assets. The forests of Mears Island create the cleanest water. Tofino gets the cleanest water, and they have very low costs for treating their water because of that, because of the actions of Moses and company 35 years ago. And the tour operators who bring the tourists out for nature bathing in the old growth forest, they get their livelihood. They work all summer and then they go to Mexico or something like that, and when the rainy season kicks in. But that's okay. And so they've been paying an ecosystem service fee for the past 8 or 9 years. And this is going to be the big challenge with the Challenge Fund and the Nature Fund, is that it's a big carrot to incentivize the creation of new IPCAs or OECMs or whatever, But then the risk is you have stranded assets, and you have to then depend on impact benefit agreements with mining companies. So how do we create long-term financial sustainability? We need to do different than what has been done in the past. The past thing, I saw it, thank you. The past thing has been proven to be unsustainable, right? Beyond a reasonable doubt, it's unsustainable. The way parks and protected areas have been created in the past have been violent against Indigenous people, but they're also economically not feasible the way they do them. And that's why the provinces are so shy. They're like, well, you got this big federal carrot right now, but then what about in 4 years from now? We're going to be left holding the bag on this. So now the ecosystem service fee on the Big Tree Trail was the thin edge of the wedge. Our long-term strategy was always to assert a tax or a ecosystem service fee on every business transaction that happens within our territory. And it's a $240 million a year tourism market. So if you look at even 1 or 2% of that for an ecosystem service fee, we're talking about a substantial amount of money that will support our Guardian program and our tribal parks into the future. And we don't have to depend on government grants anymore. Businesses in the tribal parks allies, if you want to become an ally of the tribal park, you do it voluntarily. So it's becoming like, it's sort of leading by example. And there's a lot of businesses that have jumped on board already. We expanded our ecosystem service fee program to other businesses in Tofino last year, and we're already benefiting in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. And it's supporting really important work of the Guardians. And when David Suzuki said what he did, I had Chief Gordon Plennis in the crowd, and Chief and I, Chief's territory provides clean drinking water to the 11 municipalities of southern Vancouver Island. And he and I had been already starting to engage with the business community to start to prepare a similar ecosystem service fee on southern Vancouver Island, which is tremendously more, multiple times more than Tofino's market. And so when David Suzuki said what he did, it was the perfect setup, because I came up and I said, hey, thanks for saying that. Chief Plennis, could you stand up? And everybody look around at the water that's on your tables. That all comes from Chief Gordon Plennis's territory. And in the very near future, just like in Tlaloqueat, we're going to be unleashing an ecosystem service fee program on southern Vancouver Island. And generous as he is, Chief has already agreed to share that with remote northern IPCAs so that we can create a sisterhood of IPCAs from the north. And because Gord's a great guy, but he doesn't have a lot to offer in terms of square mileage to get towards the 17%. And the feds are all about the big mileage. That's why you're so interesting to the feds, because you've got tons of land. 11% of the province, Chief Gordon Plennis says like 0.11% or something like that. But he has access to a huge market for ecosystem service fees. So if we collaborate, we can really pull off something, I think, sustainable. And Harrison Ford endorses the Muirs Island Tribal Park, and I'll just shut up now. Thank you so much for your attention. Tlako, tlako.